This is Zettelcast, brought to you by readers, writers, thinkers, and teachers from LiLLiPub, along with our partners in thought, our Zettelkastens. In this show, we share discoveries that our Zettelkastens have shown us.
There you go.
And compare notes on how we're using this marvelous invention in our creative work. Thank you for joining us.
All right, Brooke.
Do it again.
All right.
Episode 100, Retrospective plus Reintroduction.
Welcome, everybody. This is Zettelkasten number 100. 001. 001. 100. Okay. So I think that deserved just a little bit of an underscore. Julianne has not missed a single episode. I want y'all to know that.
Yay.
Each of us have missed one or two here and there, but Julianne has been right there every time. Yeah. So that's going, 104 is 2 years, So we're right up on it at the 2-year mark. So this is really, 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 really great. Okay. So we're doing something of a retrospective and a reintroduction. And we're going to be looking at two things that have been very much a part of our being together. And that's our individual Zettelkasten practices and Roanoke, the story. Okay. I'll MC today while Victoria and Julianne lead our 2 rounds, right? And since this is number 100, I hope we'll allow ourselves a little room to wander and remember and disagree and discover what we've remembered, things differently from one another, and perhaps even surprise ourselves, So Victoria is going to lead us in looking back at our Zettelkasten practices. Not just what are we doing now, but what has changed, what hasn't, what do we think, what did we think once, what did we once think was important that turned out not to be so much? And what have we discovered through actually doing this over time to be considerably more valuable than we ever thought at the beginning? So, Victoria, take us away.
Well, with that introduction, I don't even need to say anything. So, yeah, when we started thinking about how we wanted to recap this journey, of course, having a section on how our Zettelkastens began and how they've evolved and landed where we are now seemed an important detail not to overlook. So does anybody have anything prepared or anybody want to go first? Don't everybody volunteer at once.
Okay.
I could go first. So when I began my Zettelkasten, it was from reading Scott Shepherd's book. His famous, if anybody has his book, the chapter 11 is the getting started. And for a brief time, he actually was sort of teasing with a freebie of that whole thing. And I got that freebie, and that's where I started. And then I bought his book. And I was, making my way around. And one of the things that he recommends is to name your Zettelkasten in order to be developing a relationship with your Zettelkasten as a thinking partner, the way Niklas Luhmann had done. And that's not something that I normally do. Some people is like, I've named every car I've ever owned. They name all their possessions in a certain way. I've never taken to that. But in the spirit of docility, I just followed along and tried that. And what I chose for the name of my Zettelkasten is Nadia Z. Nadia refers to Nadia Boulanger, who was a world-renowned music composition teacher in the early 20th and middle 20th centuries. And she is known to have had an incredibly astute and encyclopedic mind. Not just for music, but absolutely for music. And the other thing was that she was just a supremely gifted teacher. And so I wanted someone like that for my thinking partner. I'm very glad that I've done that. And Nadia Z has a way of kind of reminding me, hey, what about me? In various ways. So one of the benefits of being together on this podcast for these many episodes is we have learned from each other. And I would say the biggest changes that have happened in my Zettelkasten are the addition of a plot box where I was not a fiction writer ever in my life, ever in decades of my life. And suddenly I have become one, and the plot box, although the structure of the plot box doesn't necessarily mirror exactly the structure of the book I think we're writing, it's close enough, which is good, it's close enough. And so my plot box is a big old dude now. It's full and heavy. The other thing,
my heart is so happy.
The other thing that I learned, and I was already doing this, I was carrying these. This is what my main Zettelkasten boxes look like. They are portable, but they're unwieldy. And as I walk down the stairs with them, I'm afraid. So I learned from Victoria, along with the plot box, to think about portability. If you want to do some of your Zettelkasten work, especially indexing for me is the sort of thing, it's like, I don't need to be in here to do that. I can go be with my husband in another room, that with me. And so that has been a big change, and it's absolutely stuck. And then the other change that has happened, all my changes are from Victoria. The big ones. My index is now big. And I'm liking that a lot. It's just, the form factor is really great. So Victoria's mindset that, if I try to just put myself into her mind as I understand it, is really thinking about how am I going to want to use this when I am in this other circumstance. And she just innovates around that. And my circumstances aren't the same. I'm not getting myself on a mule and going into the wilderness. I do go into my family room.
Which can be just as treacherous.
So those have been big changes. And then I'm just going to mention one refinement. When I began my Zettelkasten, there were about too many things at the same time. And those cards, now I sort of like repudiate those cards, but really thinking about them, in a way, they could be divided into however many cards they should have been that capture the individual ideas. And the original specimen is like, here's how this all goes together. Yeah. And so one of the things that I'm continuing to love about the practice of using the Zettelkasten is that no mistake is only a mistake. So that's me.
Excellent. Excellent. Mel, since you got scooted, do you want to go next?
I'll go next. Well, I started from the same starting point as Julianne, except that I had sort of a precursor in that I had heard of Zettelkasten before I heard of Scott Shepherd, but I had not found any reasonable instructions on how to do it analog. And I had tried to sort of work it out myself, not even knowing about Nicholas Luhmann. So, just completely trying to do it on my own. Scott showed up, got me going on the right track. But I've really changed a lot from that beginning. I've adopted the full page index instead of the card index, just like Julianne, and that is really a wonderful thing. And I have adopted from Julianne the Z-log to keep track of the cards as they are created or as they are entered into the system. Well, the next thing I talk about will show how those are now the same thing for me, basically. And that thing is, I've taken the idea from the pile of index cards method of just using the date and time as the numbering system. And we talked about this in an earlier episode, which I didn't look up the number, but it was not too far back when we had Haley Renee on for a special guest. But there's a trade-off. In the standard system that we had before, or that everybody but me is still using, you have to figure out where the card is going to go, how it's going to fit into the conversation before you can give it a number. And that is wonderful for developing context. And it means that when that card is placed, it will be in the midst of other cards that are relevant, or maybe it'll start a new conversation. But either way, it has a relevant place, and you can use location to track how ideas connect. To some extent, we still had to do linking to other locations because they could fit into multiple conversations. The downside, especially for someone like me who is not the most organized at all times, is that I would develop a backlog. I had a stack of cards that I needed to go through and figure out where they were going to go so that they could get a number, so that they could go into the index. And they were just out of the system and loose. And even if I kept them corralled, okay, they wouldn't get lost, but I couldn't use them. So I'm happy with the trade-off of giving the card a number immediately. It means that you lose the context. Well, you keep the context of the day. You keep the context of what's happening around it, but you lose the context of other conversations. That has to be put in as a separate task later. Going through, finding where things fit together. If I remember a particular card when I'm making a new one, I will put in a link right then and there on that card to help with that in the future. But it does push the conversation development off to another task. But for me, having the things in the system and findable on the Z-log has been a trade-off I'm willing to make. So this, and it actually, it inspires me to make more cards. Because I don't have to worry about it. I know it's going where it's going to go. It's not going to get lost. So if I have some idea that I might not have already, I wouldn't have done necessarily because it was just going to sit in my backlog for forever. I just write it down and I've got the number on it and it goes into the system immediately. And it's okay if there's things that are, turn out to be irrelevant. For me, speaking of names, my Zettelkasten I've named Clavis Universalis, which means the universal key. And it is happy to take in any information I want to give it. I know that Kathleen Zeke has been kind of picky about the sorts of information it likes, but mine is an omnivore. It loves it all. I've got cards about home repair, like what faucet stem do I need for the upstairs faucet? So that when I have to replace it again, I don't have to pull it apart and take the piece to the store. And hey, when was the last time I fixed it? So things like that live in there. There's all sorts of random information, things that are just interesting. And then there are the core sections that are my deep research on Ramon Lull and on medieval memory techniques and medieval intellectual exercises in general. All of that. And this is something that I haven't quite figured out how I want to handle. Do I want to keep putting new cards on those in the existing systems, or do I want to maintain the chronological order? I'm leaning towards keeping the chronological and just making a sheet showing the connections, but we'll see how that plays out.
Very cool. Very cool.
A sheet
I want
showing
to
the
back
connections sounds like a really good solution, rather
Mhm.
than that form factor allows you to get the wide angle view.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
And that is, I think that's a big part of why I'm leaning that direction.
Yeah.
It also stops you from having that pile. That's the thing.
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
Backlog. Oh my God. Yes, I understand that so
Yes.
well.
Yeah.
Oh, and I do have one more little thing to add. There was this self-published book I read a long time ago before any Zettelcast, and it was by a guy named Lion Kimbrough, and he called it "How to Keep a Record of Every Thought You Think" or something along those lines.
Oh.
And it was sort of like a proto Zettelkasten, but he was doing it on full sheets of paper. But one of his practices was once you've collected a bunch of thoughts to go through and basically make a map of how they connect to each other. And that's kind of hard to do on index cards because it gets too big for that. But on a full sheet of paper, you can do that sort of thing. And so I'm basically kind of going back to that practice in connection with the new Zettelkasten system.
You said
Cool.
4 sheets of paper? Did you say 4 sheets of paper
Full.
or 8? Full?
On a full sheet. Yeah.
I
mean, it could take
okay.
4, I suppose, if you had a
No,
lot
no,
to,
no,
to
no.
go through.
I was just having trouble visualizing how do I do this with 4 sheets of paper. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
that's good. Cool. I want to backtrack for 1 second. Julianne, do you include any non-research items in your system, like what faucet goes where or computer passwords, or do you use any like normal things that go in there or no?
A little bit. It's
Okay.
technical notes about technical troubleshooting. So
Okay.
I use Microsoft Windows, and I have a
Right.
Windows section that I created at the time that I moved from one computer to another and one operating system to another, and all the things that you need to do. And it wasn't a huge number of things to just sort of like make it like it was.
Cool.
So things like that,
Yeah.
not a huge number. But yeah, in terms of any problems that I have solved already, I'm trying to make it a habit, and at least did it with that. It's like, well, that's where it goes. Could put it in the index, be able to find it instead
Yeah.
of trolling around through folders.
Right? I know I wrote that in a journal somewhere.
Yeah.
And then in terms of other information, Mel, I know that you also Zettelcast in your gardening, will you?
I have done. I'm not great at keeping up with it, but all the stuff is still there to be used. I didn't do much gardening this year. It's been kind of a crazy year. There's some
Here,
volunteer
here.
tomatoes and some Swiss chard and the fennel. I will never plant fennel again because it turns out we don't like it that much, and it's perennial and it self seeds like crazy. I'm
Oh,
gonna be
dang.
weeding. I'm gonna be weeding fennel for years.
Yeah, I hear
The
you.
bamboo of
I feel
vegetables.
it. Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Well, who wants to jump in?
I'd like to jump in because my topic kind of ties in with Mills, specifically because I too adopted the chronological system just to try it out. My system began with Scott Shepherd, and it has grown for a number of years now, close to 3 years. And I've got every type of numbering system in existence is representative in my system. So how could I not try another system? So I've been trying it out, and I've got a pretty good stack of cards now that are chronologically numbered. So I'm not going to go back through all of the attributes that Mel gave you because he covered it beautifully. But I want to tie a few ends in together because like Julianne, like Mel, I adopted Julianne's idea of a Z-log. And a Z-log, just for a quick review, is just a page where every time I create a new card, I log an entry for it. But the thing that I'm keeping that I started quite some time ago was the idea of using a tagline. And we've discussed it many times, so I'm going to give the tiniest review here, which is a tagline is like one line, one sentence that whose purpose is to bring the whole card back to your mind. If you were sitting on a dark and stormy night, maybe something stormy would show up in the tagline, something that brings the experience of what you saw, read, learned, that you wanted to capture that card because of it. That tagline should just bring the whole thing back. The result of having those taglines really revolutionized my Zettelkasten. Before that, when I would look up an index entry, I would have this little category that told me what the subject matter of the card, and it would tell me nothing about what was on the card. I'd have to go pull the card if I wanted to use it. Very often with the tagline, I remember the card so well that I don't even have to go get the card. And not having to go get the card is one of the biggest advantages, one of the biggest ways of circumventing the largest disadvantage of a chronological numbering system is that going hither and yon in the dates to try and collect the cards that you need to write something because they arrived on different dates. But if that tagline is there and that tagline brings the whole card back, I often do not have to go get the card at all. Then I found out that when I did go to get the card, the reason I had to go get it was I needed the reference on the card. But I don't have enough room in my Z-log because I tend to go long. I don't have any room for the reference. I thought about going 2 pages, but I didn't do anything about it. And now I'm kind of glad because this is how I use these chronological cards. Mel gave reference to it, and he said he's leaning towards doing it. I am doing it. And what I am keeping nowadays, I am keeping not an index on a notebook mainly because my index is as big as my Zettelkasten was for its first year of life. And there's no way I'm going to recopy this whole thing out into a notebook. If I could have started with a full size, I would have. So what goes into my notebook? What goes into my notebook, I have an alphabetical set of dividers. Thank you, Victoria. Victoria does this. She introduced her index using these. And what I have topics at the head of my pages. And one of the innovations that I presented in an earlier discussion was the concept of having something that we simply called a directory card. And when I went to index a card, if I found something related, so I can lay hands on one. If I found something related to the card, I would note the card number and its tagline. And that way it would give me, I would do that as I was indexing the card, and then I would have all of its related subjects captured in one place. Well, one of the things I found out with, as Mel said, when you are doing this kind of a chronological date system, the production is so much faster. I'm getting my cards made. I'm getting my bib cards turned into main cards. The bottlenecks are gone. But I was finding I'm on a subject matter. The next card, I'm recopying section after section. By the time you make the third directory card that's just like the other two, but has one more line because you're building a conversation, that gets really tedious. So that's what made me realize I don't want a directory card, I want a directory page. So now, as I create new subjects, I add it to the directory page. And also in the directory page, I'm including the reference on the main card, which tells me at a glance which bib card, so I know which book, which page of which book, which author. And now I almost never have to pull my main cards back again, except when I want to go back to my thoughts and my feelings, which I always add to every card. And if I want to say, has my view of this changed now? I want to go back and read my reaction to the card in more detail. Then I'll pull the card. But if I'm just making a point or writing from my cards, I very rarely have to go back and get the cards out. So I think I just love this concept of the directory pages instead of directory cards.
So I had a question in my mind as you've been talking about that, which is your index, and I follow this practice of yours, which is once you had 3 entries with the same keyword, you would promote the keyword to its own card and be adding to that.
Yep.
But that's not, and I was wondering, well, how's that different from what you're showing? But one of the things you're showing in your notebook, it looks like the subject is got a tagline. It's not just a word. Is that correct?
And it can be a word or a phrase, but the difference about the difference between keywords and the directory pages is that the directory pages are about concepts. So that's much closer to a tagline, and maybe a tagline would be a better choice. But for me right now, a lot of my research is in a very concentrated area, different subjects, but the same overall theme. Like, for instance, the work that I'm doing relates psychology and theology and developmental psychology and positive psychology and theology and philosophy. They're coming from many different sources, but on this as regards the same themes. So I'm pulling into it a set of themes. And so I'm trying to capture the contributions to that theme group by group. And then the pages are often the points that I'm going to end up making. The thing I'm trying to present to my reader is going to have to be documented. What are my sources for this? Why do I get to say this? Well, here's the sources from the different fields. And I can grab them very quickly because I have my references right there. And if I want to do an exact quote, I just go grab the book and I can do it, or grab my bib card and do it. And I believe that it's going to solve the problem. Otherwise, the fear that I had was I was going to be grabbing my index and looking for key words that tied to the point that I was trying to make, and think of, well, what word did I use? And then trying to think of all the different words that I might have used. Because I went through that when writing my Zettelkasten book, which I've put down for a number of months, but I'm picking back up again. It's almost done. When I pulled the cards for that book, it was a Herculean effort to pull them, and it was twice as bad to put them away. And I don't want to have to go through that again.
Yeah.
Now
well,
I can.
You've got me thinking. Yeah. Now you've got me thinking. I'm so glad you shared this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So now if I need something, I'll be pulling a few cards to make the point of that section and putting them back again. I am again going to pull all the cards I need for a book. What was I thinking?
Yeah.
I really like your innovation of putting if there's a reference, an external reference on the card, putting that into that page so that you have that right there, that is excellent. And I am definitely going to incorporate that.
Yeah.
And it helps me an awful lot too, because when I'm contrasting how positive psychology talks about something compared to theology, it really helps me when I look, Peterson and Seligman, okay, that's the psychology approach. And I don't have to bring the whole card back to memory and then say, what was the view? Oh, yes. I see that immediately, and that helps bring the card back because I know what source I was reading when I made that card.
Now we're all like,
Yeah.
It's like,
so now I'm going
pause
to have
for
to add
side
another.
notes.
I'm going to have to add another chapter to my Zettelkasten book. Thanking Haley and you, Mel, and you, Julianne. Well, I've already included you guys for what you've offered, but now this new wrinkle is going to have to be another chapter that I hadn't anticipated.
Nice. More homework. All right, Deb, you want to jump on in here?
You're muted.
Hold on. You're unmute.
Did that when I had my coughing fit there. Okay. Yeah. So I still am not as organized as I'd like to be. The major thing that has changed for me is more personal than physical. And when I say personal, I'm talking about the way I'm able to think now. Prior to being involved with this group, with dealing with the Zettelkasten and these handy dandy newsletters that I'm getting, right? Put it all together and Deb Hart expands. Okay? Expands in a way that doesn't make me feel like I'm bloated or something. It's not like that. It's mentally accommodating, and I can just it's like glasses. I put on a pair of glasses that are my prescription and I can see. Take them off, pre-Zettelkasten, pre-group, and I don't see as well. So that's as close to an analogy as I can get to it. But it's the world of difference. I problem solve better. I mean, even when this group even helped me get from A to Z when I had to take a trip to my daughter's graduation. I hadn't been on a plane in 15 years. I was beside myself and then some, right? But altogether, what I've learned, what I've experienced, the exchange between all of us, what those exchanges have led to, all of that has made me a tremendously better thinker and a person who can now deal with anxiety on a much more reasonable level. Right. So I have no doubt that the physical part of my Zettelkasten will catch up. I know this. I have no doubt, because what the thinking tells me over and over and over again that the cards not being in their special place and being pickable at will means that there is some idea that's not participating. There is some idea that's not participating. it doesn't know about this one or that one. I'm saying, wait a minute, that's called log in front of you. You don't want to throw logs in front of yourself. This is not the thing. But here, if I had, something, you have the devil on the right and the angel, and they're pulling you back and forth. You say, no, I have proof in front of me. There are human beings who are following these structures, and they are blossoming. And I'm blossoming too. But imagine if I had the physical part all together, what that would be like.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for real.
Fasten your seatbelts.
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
Fasten your seatbelts.
You'll get
Yeah.
At least. And we're talking about the 5-point seatbelt too, by the way. Not just across the lap. That's not good enough. That I have to have something stronger than that.
Yeah.
Race car seatbelt.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing. And it's caused me to get my environment straight. You notice I have on a blur now, and I don't have my vanity screen. It's not there.
Yeah.
Because I'm tearing all that down to make space for what I'm doing now, and knowing precisely why. All of this is
Nice.
Zettelkasten driven, I'm telling you. So I'm pleased as punch. I am. Yeah. So I answered your question. Oh, and my I had a name that I don't even remember for my Zettelcast. And then we had one of our episodes, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But the upshot of it was, thinking about that episode made me think, oh, I know what your name is. Name is Zach.
Oh.
Zach. And I said, wow, that's really close to Kathleen. She said, she's Zeke. I said, well, that's Zeke and Zach, and that's just that. That's
They'll probably be best friends.
Hey, so it said, yeah, I'm with you, Zeke. Zach. So Zach is his name. It's not a her, it's a him. And he's going to be a marvelous piece of support for me. So that's that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Well, and what's really cool is I think everybody touched on one of the things that I was going to mention. So this is perfect. So first, I can 100% echo the psychological benefit of not worrying about things, because if you know anything about me, my journey started because I was stuck writing a novel. I'd been stuck for 20 some years and could not get it out because it had gotten too big and I couldn't hold all the story in my head to be able to work with it. And so I found Scott's system, basically cannibalized the whole thing, and then retrofitted it for fiction. I just knew that would work, and it did, and allowed me to get the book done. And it gave a way to work with the information in small bite-sized pieces, depending on what my cognitive load was on a given day. Some days I could do 40 things at once. Other days, one task was too much. So it definitely made me not worry about the work anymore, because I knew as my system grew And as my story grew, I didn't have to worry because everything was in the note cards. Like that, just having that weight lifted was truly epic. It literally changed my life in every way. So I finished the novel, started the developmental edit, and as you know, the poor novel got shoved aside to take 395 days and write this beast. Well, this presented a different kind of problem because the novel, all of the things that I built my notebox around served fiction. They served the story I was writing. So it wasn't necessarily a lot of quotable research because all of the research I did was a starting point for making shit up. So I didn't have to worry about the academic piece of it. But when I wrote this book, my beloved editor, Julia, I think we took like a month or maybe a little more just on chapter 1 because I was still thinking like a fiction writer. And I was putting things in and taking things out and moving stuff around. And she's like, stop, we need to put this in some kind of order. And so then that was the first time that my Zettelkasten evolved because all of a sudden I had to take off my fiction writer's hat somewhat. And I had to put back on what I consider my debater's hat, which is fully cited sources, full links between referenced ideas, stating your argument, supporting your argument. I had to really lean back into that. And again, without the Zettelkasten system, this wouldn't have been possible. I mean, I just could not have done it and held it all in my head. So through that process, I kind of grew a secondary notebook. So my Zettelkasten is 5 drawers. They're 18 inches deep and they're a little wider. They're about 2 inches wider than a note card, so 8 inches wide. So I have a lane, if you will. If I scoot all the cards to the side, I have a lane. So what I started doing was when I would pull cards, like say to work in a chapter, when I was finished with that, then they would get parked in the right-hand lane. So I still had them in the drawer, but the things I was working with were right kind of where they belonged, just adjacent. So those are the kinds of things that evolved out of necessity because I knew as I would, we would jump over and work in this chapter and then we'd jump back and work in that one. And I was like, I have to keep all this together, but I can't refile them. So they just got tucked in near the area that I had pulled them, kind of in groups. So that was the first major thing that evolved out of transitioning from writing fiction to writing nonfiction. And then so I finished this book and started to pivot back to working on the novel. And that created the task of having to go through basically the whole novel again, because it had been over 2 years since I'd really touched it. So that was fairly terrifying because it's like, crap, what if this system doesn't work? Because you're always wondering because it had just been sitting over there. And the worst part was I had added 2 journals, a traveler's notebook, stacks of note cards that when I laid them all out, there were 11 piles. Just you name it, I had it. So like I do, I fret and fret about the work until I just decide that's it, I'm doing the work. So one afternoon, not all that long ago, I put everything on the desk. And I had, at that point in time, developed out the second book that will be coming out next month called Time Box Tools. So it takes the plot box that Julianne showed, And it further develops that into a more granular system that has its own managing tool, which is essentially one of these, but in a different format. It's an index, just a little different. And so now I've got two sets of projects going because I also write my physical monthly newsletter. That requires me to do the research, track the research, cite the sources, and wear my academic hat. But I'm also working on the novel project. So bringing those skills to then the next iteration of what my system is going to look like was, there was always a part of me kind of standing outside myself, observing how this was evolving, because my Timebox Tools book is about how to evolve your system from Plotbox, which is kind of a roughy draft, to a finished book. So the first thing I did was I set up my note boxes. So for me, this is what that turned into, all of those piles and whatnot. This is actually a recipe box that has like a lid, but I took it off because it bugged me. So it's 4x6 cards, and on this side sits the main structure for the plot box, and on this side sits the structure for the time box. So this is an evolution of what began over here. So I can move things freely back and forth, which now most things have been moved over into the time box because I'm at that level of organization. And then the complement to it, which I should have taken this lid off and I didn't, is the main box for my novel. So I took it out of the drawer where it generally lives, and for the sorting process, I put it in here because, again, it needed to be more modular. So speaking back to what Julianne said, I need to be able to move my junk around. And so what that allowed me is in the front of that main box sits this little guy, which I call threads. So in my organization process, what I did was every card came out of its pile and got filed into that main box, unless that card was specific to a story thread that needed to get resolved or thoroughly written out. All the threads now live in here. Here's the cool thing. When I did that, I discovered very quickly, and this, for me, this is the coolest part of the whole system and how it works with your brain. I naturally pre-sort things into basically the same sets of buckets, regardless of what I'm working on. And so as I'm pulling and looking at those cards, it's like, oh, this is that character, this is that character, or this is that scene, this is that scene. So it became way easier than I thought it was going to be to just deal those cards into the buckets they belonged in, where I left this pile of crap sitting over there for a year because I couldn't bear to think about sorting through it. So that was the coolest thing I discovered, is because when I set up my original story main box, my novel lives in the 7,000s. Each character has a number. The plot box provided a loose structure for leafing in scenes where I thought they went. And then the time box provides the granular organization. I was just able to go, oh, this is plot box because I think this happens after the midpoint, but I haven't really done anything with it. Tuck it in. These are character cards. Tuck those into the main box under that character. It literally kind of sorted itself. It took me 4.5 hours to sort all 11 piles of crap, 5 journals, all the stuff. And it was just done. And I came out with these 3 perfectly organized, beautiful boxes, and the story's all back in order, which blew my mind. I was like, no way did that just happen to me.
4 hours.
The
Wow.
cool thing is, it proved out from total chaos, which I'm kind of glad that I let the novel sit for a couple of years, because they say you should take time away from your final draft before you go back to it because it's easier to do a fresh reread. Well, I'm kind of glad I let the whole thing just fall into hell for a while, because when I came back to it, it proved to me the system works. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So yes, mine has changed form several times. Mine started in a little note box and then it grew a little bigger and then it grew into 2 side-by-sides and now it's 5 drawers that stack in a cabinet. Except for what I'm working on, which I just showed you for the novel. And then the other project-driven change, which has been a strong evolution, is going from writing fiction to nonfiction. Because I never intended to use my Zettelkasten to write nonfiction. But I never felt all of your hands on my back pushing me off the cliff. So I had to kind of figure that out, and learning to keep things in those buckets is probably the most useful tool, because anything that's same with same gets clipped together. I use these little acrylic note card holders, so I keep blank cards or cards that I've used clipped in the back, and then I can take whatever I'm currently working from and just set it in the front.
Yeah.
That's a nice workflow. I have several of these. There's one on every desk. And then just learning to keep one eye on my mind so that I know, I mean, I probably read between 6 to 8 different books of literary theory every month to write my newsletter. And like Kathleen, I tag those cards to who they come from. Oh, these are Booth's theories. I know that. Or this is Richardson. Richardson's back again. I kind of keep those buckets going, both in my mind and how I group cards together. And that helps inform the writing. But I do find if I just pull the cards for a section and lay them out, I can literally just sit down and draft out right from the cards. So definitely having a good tagline. I also need to know, do I agree with or disagree with what I've captured? Because a lot of times I'm having arguments with the theorists that I'm reading, and I always want to point out either my bias or my argument to my reader if it's relevant. So that's something that 7 months of newsletters has taught me, is develop that critical skill as you're creating the cards, so that when you go back, if you have to use them either to support an argument or to throw a rock, you have what you originally thought about that information included right there. Because sometimes later I will remember, oh crap, I didn't agree with that. It's too late.
Yeah.
So I learned early on to keep a tab in what my own thoughts about the material are. Because, I think my readers find that interesting. Do I agree with this or not? And I'll tell you. And I'll add one final thing, which this is something I had never read about. I'm not a musician other than my bass guitar, but we won't get into that. I did sing. I sang in the choir, so I can read music. I could right now if I had to, but I don't generally. Don't know anything about music theory. But for this newsletter, I introduce a literary device that's musically based. And so that was interesting because it's the first time that I have tackled creating an argument around something that I completely have no understanding of, which is music. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of comments, if any, I get about that, because it just once again proves, if you are diligent about the research and what you think about what you're reading, it really does completely provide the substructure for the writing process, 100%. Because years ago, I would have read about that and been like, that's not relevant to me. I'm not a musician. Or I just would have given it like, a fast and loose treatment. But having the research and having my thoughts about it, having all of that in the note cards, it makes you unafraid to dive in to something that maybe you're not entirely sure of, because you've done the research, you can point people to where you found it, and then they can go and do their own explorations. So, it takes away that barrier of, I have to be an expert of everything. No, I just have to introduce you to what I found and then send you on your own journey. So
Yeah.
if any one superpower has evolved out of this year's writing, that's it. It makes you way less afraid of kind of wading out into the sharks, because you don't have to be the expert. You just have to come back with what you found and then let other people go their own way with it. So that's how mine has changed the most over the course of the projects that I'm working on. And yes, you heard the mule reference. My note box is named Wilma, which you meet Wilma in this book. There's a lovely picture of her. She is a pack mule that lives in the backcountry of Idaho. She carried me many times, 3 and 4 hour rides into and out of the backcountry, where I'm ridiculously afraid of heights, but she rode me across those ridges, and I literally put my life in her hands. And I feel very much the same way about my Zettelkasten, because I'm literally rebuilding my life on top of this note box. So it's Wilma.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Wow, it almost looks as though we have spent our whole hour on
On
the
round
first
one.
topic. So it looks like we're going to have to continue on to episode 101 to do our Roanoke, because we certainly don't want to crush it into the last few moments.
That's true. That's true. I think that's a capital, wonderful idea. And so
Yeah.
I just want to thank everybody for the journey that we have taken together on this in this last hour. This is wonderful. All the tidbits of the wonderful, wonderful, innovative things that have come out of you guys' minds. It's I'm certain that there should be anyway, lots of comments from viewers in terms of what they've learned from this one episode, this one Zettelkasten focused episode, and the auxiliary things that we have associated with these boxes that make them even more powerful. So hats off to everybody. Yes. And so, Kathleen, where can everybody find more information?
You can come to LiLLiPub, LiLLiPub.org. It's where we hang out when we're not in YouTube land.
Yeah.
LiLLiPub, the best $8 a month you'll ever spend.
Anytime. That's right.
Come see us.
Come see us. Bye.